Hey, what's up, everybody? Derek here from M1 Realty. I'm here with my good friend Keith Conklin and Chad Atwell from Lighthouse Commercial Capital Investments. And we're going to talk a little bit about what programs are available for small businesses and entrepreneurs out there. I know there's been a lot of, the past couple of days, been a lot of discussion about the PPP program and, what companies got that funding, what companies didn't, and why. So I guess without further ado, Keith, take it away. Let us know who you are and what you're all about.
Yeah, sure. So listen, thanks for having us, Derek. It's exciting to be here on a somewhat chilly April afternoon. I think it was about 35, maybe 40 degrees when we kicked this podcast off. So Lighthouse Commercial Capital, it's a commercial finance firm. We do debt primarily, small balance debt, so debt less than $10 million is probably what we specialize in. It could be for any conceivable use of fund as long as it's a business purpose. So it could be a business acquisition, it could be a debt restructure, it could be to buy real estate, equipment, line of credit, equipment financing. It could be all different kinds of stuff. But if it's commercial, it could be multifamily, it could be an apartment complex, it could be an office space. We basically will finance any and all of that stuff. And so in terms of the programs that are out there that are available to people, most people really aren't aware of what type of debt products really exist in the market. And that's primarily because the first place that people go to find debt, logically, is their local bank. And so when they walk into a local bank, they're going to be presented with the options that that bank has, but that's going to be a pretty small fraction of what the marketplace actually offers. So banks will have common debt programs like the SBA. They'll do SBA programs, but they're very hesitant to lend. There's two primary business models out there. There is the branch bank business model that people like you get exposed to, where you go in and you talk to a banker, and what they're really after is your deposit relationship. That's where they make their money, is on those deposits. They reinvest it, they pay you interest, but they're reinvesting that elsewhere and they're making interest on that. And then they sell you other stuff and you've got fees and things like that. That's their bread and butter. Lending is something they do because they have to protect their deposit relationship, but it's not something they're doing that they want to do. So banks typically, not exclusively, but if you've got a branch-oriented bank, typically what they're going to do, Derek, is they are going to keep servicing your debt after you close a loan, and they're going to make their small interest on it. There's a whole other branch of lenders out there, which are banks that don't have any branches. And instead of servicing your loan for 10 or 25 years and making a couple points of interest, they package them and sell them on the secondary market. It's the exact same product that you would get from your local branch. The only difference is these guys want to do the deal, okay? And so they're incentivized to say yes, whereas branch-oriented banks are incentivized to say no. And so that's the kind of thing that a lot of people, they always go to their banker first. That's what you should do too, by the way. I'd recommend that. But the answer typically is going to be no, or we don't have that program, or we're super strict and we're only getting partially solve the capital need. And so that's where we can kind of play a role.
Excellent. And then Chad, I know that you kind of specialize in the PPP program right now for Keith, and seeing as how you have the most impressive beard amongst the three of us, why don't you delve into that a little bit? Tell us kind of what's going on with that, because that's been in the news the past couple of days about who those funds were allocated to and who got left out. What's up? What's going on?
Yeah, absolutely. Also, I'd like to thank just a high protein diet and regular combing just to make a big difference. But yeah, PPP has been wild. It's been just about 2 weeks since the SBA and Treasury kind of opened up the doors for this program. It was really aimed at small businesses, so businesses less than 500 folks, and the SBA kind of opened up some of its other previous limitations for things like franchises and other organizations to also get access. What we saw pretty quickly was that the guidelines weren't out there for lenders to underwrite these loans. So we had a lot of clients who were putting in applications to lenders, and lenders were saying, yes, bring us the applications, we're participating in the program, we'll take all your docs, we'll submit you to the SBA, we'll be good to go. And what actually happened was all of the submissions went in and a lot of applications were out there, and then we didn't hear anything. And lenders started shutting down their application processes and things like that, or restricting the influx of new applications because of the business they were receiving. So it was kind of a wild time. Only towards the, even last week was the SBA clarifying some of these guidelines that lenders had been looking for. Just taking a quick point to talk about some of those guidelines, because there was a lot of confusion. This was a program that was really aimed at not just small businesses, but also sole proprietors, self-employed individuals, anyone who either paid themselves or was doing business as the entity were also supposed to be the folks that these funds were allocated to. We saw a lot of those people who were applying, but there was a lot of confusion. And the basic of the program was you were going to get a loan for the equivalent of 2.5 months of your payroll expenses. So your last 12 months payroll or salary, whatever that was equivalent to, 2.5 months worth of that, and 80% of those funds, 75% of those funds had to go towards the actual payrolls, and that last 25% could go towards a few other utilities, lease payments, and things like that. So awesome program on paper, and I really hope that we see more ability to use it. Because as it stands, the SBA came out Thursday morning, Thursday evening, saying that those funds had been all allocated and there wasn't anything left. And frankly, we're kind of curious too as to who got funded and where and things like that. So some of that still waits to be seen, but definitely been an interesting couple of weeks.
So let me interject and add a little bit to that, because if you're watching this and you've applied for PPP and you haven't received it yet, or if you haven't applied, but you want to, you're wondering what the hell you should do, okay? Right. And the truth is, there is no right answer to that question. I think that we have some ideas, but there's no great way to move forward on this. And the reason I say that is because different banks are moving at different paces and submitting at different protocols. And some data is starting to emerge as to who got funded. And it's, as I understand it, it's been alleged it's been on a first in, first out basis. Although I personally really wonder if that's the case. And the reason I say that is because, so PPP is for entities up to 500 people inside of an organization. So that's how they're defining small business. And Chad, correct me if I'm wrong, but you could be the owner of 10 different entities, each of which have 400 people, and all 10 would qualify for PPP. Is that correct?
You know what? Yeah, that would be correct, as long as each individual entity was paying payroll. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yep. Okay. So the funding numbers that I've seen that have come through have been for large enterprises, relatively speaking, not the 5-person company. I haven't heard of any of the 5-person companies getting funded. Certainly, we've processed dozens of PPP applications for people from, I think, day 2 or day 3 of the program's launch.
Yep.
Because it launched on a Friday and no lender was doing it on that Friday. SBA issued updated guidance on Sunday, I believe, the following Sunday, literally a couple later over the weekend, because lenders didn't know how to interact with the program.
That's right.
And I think we put in our first applications on Monday or Tuesday. And that was as fast as we could go because a lot of banks still weren't accepting them. So I'm not really sure where those funds went. I'm not really sure how that $350 billion got tapped out. Everything that we heard was no one's getting funded. And the next thing I heard was it's all depleted. And so it's perplexing for us. And we talk to literally dozens of lenders that do this, because we're not tied to any one lender. When we're going through this process, we're trying to figure out which banks actually want to do it. Most banks don't want to do it. The reason most banks don't want to do it is because if they don't get it right, it's not a grant anymore. It becomes a loan, and it's not guaranteed by the SBA if they don't follow the guidelines of the SBA. The SBA guidelines were unintelligible, and therefore they were hesitant to lend, because if they get it wrong, it becomes a non-secured loan, which is going to have a high default rate because they're given out to everybody. And so banks were in a quagmire. This is kind of the nature of the dysfunction that we observed. And so when we talk to people, bankers, or non-bankers, because it's not just banks that are doing PPP in a lot of these programs, some of them are non-banks. Right. There's just all kinds of confusion even from the bankers. So I'm very confused myself. It doesn't feel like it was a first in, first out type situation. It feels like it was larger organizations. I can't say that definitively. It's just the sense that I get. What should you do if you've put in a PPP application and you haven't been financed yet, or if you haven't received your SBA approval number yet? Like I said, there's no right answer, but I would say stay in line. All right. So there is legislation for another $250 billion pending. And if you withdraw your app, I suspect you're gonna have to get back in line again. Okay. Right. Now, what bank should you go to? What bank should you not go to? I don't know. I mean, I think, Derek, you might have a personal anecdote about how you tried to go to your personal bank. Personal bank wasn't accepting PPP applications. And so kind of late in the game, we got you in with a different lender. If you're in line, don't pull out. And if you're not in line, I would say prepare an application. Chad, I don't think anyone, I don't know of any lenders right now while the legislation is pending that are accepting applications, although there could be some. Do you know any that are accepting any presently?
No, and we've reached out to a couple even as of yesterday, just saying, hey, we understand the funds have been depleted, but are you still accepting apps? I've not heard anything back, and the handful of websites that were submitting applications through the lender's site, those have been paused as well. So we're definitely still in a position to submit more applications once that opens up. I'll be curious to see what some of our lenders say if and when that does happen.
Right.
Some of them are prepared for sure.
So I would say get your package ready. So if you're in line, stay in line. If you're not in line yet, don't stop now, okay? Get your package ready. There's not a whole lot of documentation that's necessary to apply for these loans. There's an SBA application, and then I think some very basic payroll data, and that's about it. And so get your stuff ready. And if you've got, a banker that you're familiar with or that's comfortable, that if you have a personal relationship with a banker, ask them, if I give this to you, what are you going to do with it? And then based on that answer, maybe try and find someone else. We can do this stuff on behalf of people too. Our approach is this. So we're still collecting the applications, and we're still collecting the payroll data, and we're still talking to our lenders. And as soon as something opens up, we're going to hit whatever our backlog is, 15 at a time. We're just going to pop them all in there, and get the people back in line. I don't know what's going to happen as a consequence of that. I can't tell you you're going to get funded. You're not going to get funded. When you're going to get funded, if it's going to go through, if it's not going to go through. We just don't know for sure, because this first thing, it was there. It was a cluster. It was in the blink of an eye depleted. What's going to happen in round 2? Will there be a round 3? I don't know. What I do know is that there's no penalty for trying, and it is grant money as long as you stay within the fidelity of the program, which essentially means fill out the application honestly and present your payroll data honestly. If you do those things, then it becomes a grant. So everyone with less than 500 employees in their organization should apply. Everybody should do it, because the worst case scenario is nothing happens. And exactly. I think there's a pretty high likelihood that something good will happen.
Excellent. Yeah, I have to say, just personally on my experience was, the bank that I do business with, through my company, had sent out several emails saying, hey, we're working on an application process, bear with us while we figure this out. And then once the funds were depleted, immediately after that, they sent out an email saying, well, we're hoping there's a round 2. So, but at that point, luckily, I'd spoken to you prior to that and gotten my application in through you guys. And that was much more, obviously a much more streamlined process than the fact that I actually got an application in. But, it was, I have to say, the way that you guys explained it and walked me through the process was extremely easy. And I have to agree with you. If you haven't submitted anything yet, or you're not sure what's going on, to give you guys a call and just get something in, because I have a feeling that since the first rollout of this, the public relations aspect of it was so poor that they are probably going to target actual small businesses the second time around. I would hope.
I don't know. I don't know how it got. It got chunked out. So our average application was what, Chad? Would you say, just in terms of funding?
Like 32,000, I think, was the average amount.
Yeah, and so we had dozens of these things, and so 32,000 is the average amount. That's and then I think it was what's the restaurant chain that you saw, Derek? Got 20 million in financing. Who was that?
Yeah, it was a steakhouse, like a higher end steakhouse chain. Got 20 million.
Yeah. Right. So why? Maybe they're. I don't know. Did they get it in first? Were they the first one to get it done? Well, getting it in first doesn't seem like it should have mattered all that much, because the banks didn't do anything with those applications for days because they didn't understand the program and they couldn't even submit them. So I don't understand. Right. It just seems like the larger ones got the financing first. I don't know that for sure. So that's not me saying I have data that backs that up,
Right.
but anecdotally, I haven't heard any of the small guys getting anything.
And I have a similar conjecture, and this is all just me, conjecture on my part, but thinking through the process that the banks are getting paid on. They're getting paid on these loans from the SBA on a really standard scale. I believe it's 5, 3, and 1 points, depending on the loan amount. And I've already had some of these bankers tell me, look, we're not making any money on these as it is. So it's really difficult to spread that margin any thinner. So it's plausible that banks are being choosy with what's going to be our best bang for the buck, right?
Yeah, that's true. Get it out of the way.
Guys, yeah. Or do I do 100 small guys, as opposed to the loan amounts?
Yeah.
I don't know.
So here's something. So I'll give you a recommendation on what not to do if you find yourself in the situation where you haven't been financed yet too. So there's no right answer, although I think there are some good ways to proceed potentially. But here's a wrong answer, in my opinion, something that I would counsel people not to do. Don't just fire off an application to some nameless, faceless web portal, okay?
Right.
Because you don't know what's on the other end of that thing. And that's not me saying that nameless, faceless web portal is illicit, because it's probably not. It's probably legit. But you need, in my estimation, you need to talk to someone who has some insight about what's going to happen after you fire it off. Okay?
Right.
I think there's a personal relationship in this process, which is extremely important. Talk to your business banker and ask the question wherever they're at. When I submit this, what happens to this application next? You know what most of them are going to say? Most of them are going to say, I don't know, because they don't know, because that's what I hear from 90% of the bankers that I talk to.
Mm-hmm.
Then my next question is, does this go to an underwriter after this is submitted? What's the approval process look like? The answer to that question is, I don't know.
Right.
Okay. That's not the answer that you want, but it's better than having no estimation at all. I think you need to be able to talk to someone. Has your bank approved any of these things? Has any of this money come out yet? And you're going to get a whole bunch of, I don't know. That's just the reality. But I think that, having some idea, even a general sense of how a bank is going to treat, or a non-bank, because it's not all banks, are going to treat your application after it's submitted, is a far superior situation to be in than just blasting it out and praying.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. I agree. So aside from the PPP, what other programs are out there available to people? I mean, I know there's some specific to us. I know there are some things that were rolled out at the county level and the state level, but nationally, what else? What other avenues do people have if they're in the same position that I'm in, where I'm doing everything I possibly can not to lay off my staff?
Right.
I'm not being left with a whole lot of options at this point. What else is out there?
Let me jump in with one real quick, Keith. Sorry to cut you off.
Yeah,
I this earlier. So the other half of the CARES Act, there's the PPP and there's also the EIDL. This is something that's out there, and it's not something that we're involved in, but it's something that people did just start to get funding from in the last couple of days. So this is the program that opened up in the end of March 27th, I think applications went open. It's a grant of up to $10,000 that a lot of people have been talking about. So on the EIDL side, again, it is money that doesn't have to be paid back. One of the things that folks didn't know about that application process is that it's actually a $1,000 per employee headcount that's factored into that grant. So it's not just a flat $10,000 across the board, but it could be $1,000, for example, for a sole proprietor. So something else to look into if you have not.
Yeah, those are economic injury disaster loans, and that was even, I think that's what it stands for, right? Economic industry disaster, the EIDL.
Yep, yeah, exactly.
And that was an even more foobarred rollout than the PPP was. I mean, people, I got so many calls from people that submitted an application on this. Like, I applied for an SBA Express loan. I'm like, what are you talking about? Because an SBA Express loan is an actual debt product. It's a real thing. Like, I applied for that. I'm like, no, you didn't. I'm like, yes, I did. I went to the economic disaster website and I pushed the button and it said Express. I'm like, send me your documentation. And then I got a screenshot of some strange SBA screenshot that said our portal is down and we will try and get back as in expressive fashion as possible. And so they wrote Express. This confused the hell out of everybody. Yeah, I think that so I don't know all the details on the EIDL. I know that they're smaller in terms of what can be qualified for, and I believe they need to be paid back. But I'm not certain about all the details on those. But that's the only other federal program that I'm aware of. And so then that gets into the question of what other types of financial instruments are out there. Okay. And so to give a little context as to where I'm coming from, so Chad and I at Lighthouse Capital are brokers. I do some lending myself. I do real estate lending occasionally for deals that make sense, but most of the deals that we do as a broker, just like an insurance broker. If you want a life insurance policy, you tell them your health stats and they go out, and if you've got a good insurance broker, they're going to talk to 10 different companies on your behalf and figure out which one best suits your needs. Same type of stuff for us, except we structure deals and submit them for debt. Exact same type of process though. So that said, we're not tied to a bank, and we're not tied to one bank's lending program. We're not tied to banks. We do deals with private equity firms and non-banks and private capital and hybrid banks and lenders that have an affiliation with a bank and banks. So we've got basically, through the years that we've been doing this and the lots of, the multiple tens of millions of dollars that we financed, we know a lot of people that do a lot of different stuff. So there's other debt products out there, but you need to be super careful, because a lot of the debt that's available now, or non-debt, but sort of off-balance sheet financing, like factoring, you need to be careful. One needs to be careful because there might be money out there, but sometimes you're sharpening the knife to cut your own wrist. Just because there's access to capital doesn't mean it's always wise to take it. So, generally speaking, as you look across the small business debt market, debt markets are drying up like crazy. So for business purposes, primarily, the SBA has been the spigot through which small business debt, when I say small business, I mean debt less than 10 million, generally less than 5 million, has been provided. So if people needed working capital, SBA was a cost-effective way to do it. If they needed debt consolidation to buy a business, usually we go through the SBA. Almost all of that activity is turned off presently. So some deals are still happening with some lenders in the SBA. They're being very judicious, obviously, about what they're choosing to lend on. But many of them are just so swamped with PPP that they're just trying to push through this PPP stuff, and they're not happy about it. But what deals are out there? I mean, if there's still a solid deal with real estate, and, good collateral and good credit, they're still happening. But it's got to be a great deal in order for it to get kind of financed through the SBA right now. So what other types of things can one do? Depends on the business. Most of the stuff gets pretty expensive after that. I mean, so business credit cards, some ways you can turn those into cash. One can factor accounts receivable. It's basically selling your accounts receivable for someone who will give you money for your accounts receivable today, and then your client will later pay them 30 or 60 days later instead of you, and that's how they pay themselves off. So I mean, there's other types of debt out there, but for the most part, hunker down and do the best that you can, because there's not a lot of cheap debt that's going to be out there, and I don't see it coming in the near term either.
Right. And as somebody coming from my situation, I've never financed a nickel for this company. I mean, I've always funded everything. So even the fact that we're in this position at all is a little bit unnerving to me. But I think the mid to long-term prospects for the real estate market, personally, are still the sky isn't falling on the real estate market. I guess let's put it that way. I think there's still demand. The fundamentals are still there. We're right in the middle of the selling season, but nobody can sell their house right now, or at least we can only do virtual showings. I mean, I'm going to be writing an offer here today on a house that I showed virtually yesterday, which is a whole new experience. But I guess from my perspective, I think somebody in my situation is going to be just fine. There's not a good market or a bad market. It's always a good market for somebody. So you just need to figure out who to take advantage of it and go there.
Right.
But what are your thoughts, guys, about the overall economy? Like, obviously nobody excuse me, nobody has a crystal ball. This could go any which way, but what are your thoughts as far as, when are we going to be able to dig ourselves out of this? What do you see happening in the next, month to 3 months to 9 months to 12 months?
Yeah. So I think we're in a transformational economic period. And what I mean by that is, so I believe that right now our economic troubles are deep, quite deep, and temporary. Okay. Now, what the brevity of that period is in terms of deep impact, I don't know if that's 3 or 6 months. I think it is, maybe longer than that. But it's I don't think it's a 5-year economic calamity. All right. I think that this is something which gets adapted to. We'll have a vaccine at some point in time. Once the vaccine is in place, then it's really recovery economically from whatever deep damage was done prior to. And so I think that the vaccine is, anywhere from what they're saying at the end of the year, maybe at the earliest, maybe in the middle of 21. I think that's your window for economic woe from which we must recover. I think in pockets, we will see the economy recovering as we've had peak exposure in some areas, and then we start to flatten the curve and then decline on the curve and then move into a more viable situation. I think we've got some good data from the Far East that lets us kind of look at how and when we might approach that. So I expect pockets of economic recovery, which from a small business perspective means that if you're doing business locally, your prospects are going to be tied to that local market in terms of its recovery from opening up again. Thereafter, I think, so now let's say we got a vaccine in place, then you're going to go through a recovery period, barring any other macroeconomic situation, which might further impede, because who knows? I mean, we had a correction coming anyway. We absolutely had an economic correction coming anyway, in my estimation.
Yeah.
If you look at valuations of the stock market, they were probably not sustainable over the long period of time. So a correction was coming, and this might have just coincided with the correction, which means there might not be another one, but there could be a further correction. So, that initial curve, which may have been heading down like this, might blank it out, it might not. But I think that real recovery starts after that. That's when the damage starts to get repaired. I mean, that's when the debt markets start to free up again, too. And once you have debt start to free up, that allows people to begin expansion again. And so that's when I think that's going to be really kind of happening. The transformational nature of what the economy is going to be, though, is what does that mean? And everyone talks about the new normal, like this thing we're doing right here. Instead of sitting in a room and having someone videotape the three of us doing this, we're doing this over Zoom. I've been doing a ton of stuff like this. My selling habits in the past have really involved getting on an airplane and flying out to meet someone and talking about stuff, and now I'm doing it like this. I don't know if I'm going to get on an airplane again after this. I mean, so what is that? What are the other reverberations economically? Am I really going to want to go to a restaurant and sit next to a whole bunch of people, or sit at a bar and get breathed on by a bunch of strangers? Maybe I do. I want to get breathed on by Derek. I know that. I want to get breathed on by Chad, but I don't want to get breathed on by those strange guys over at the bar, do I?
Right.
So that kind of stuff's going to go through people's minds, I think. So I think the economy is going to look different because life's going to look different, and the economy will mirror life. And so I guess the real questions is, after this recovery, what's life going to look like? And that's where I think the conversation, frankly, starts to get interesting.
Got it.
That's a good answer. Yeah. I'll just add one thing that kind of reminded me off of the tail end of what Keith was saying, and talking to a lot of small business owners in the last 2 weeks. There certainly is a lot of hard times out there, and there's a lot of folks who are having to shut their doors already, and there's bad news for sure. And then there's also some good stories of folks who are saying, yeah, you know what, we figured this out, or we had to change, and we're still able to help our clients in this way. And kind of like Keith was mentioning, we're doing things differently, where a lot of our business would have been face to face, and it's just not anymore. You mentioned doing your virtual home tours and things like that, which is certainly no replacement. But there are good, stories out there where people are figuring things out, and they're able to keep their doors open, or they're able to help their employees or their clients. And, so you talk about what the world looks like after that, and it certainly will be different. I'm just glad for these little wins here and there, in the interim, and people are figuring things out and, helping people along the way. So there's some cool stories in there.
Absolutely. That's a very good point, Chad. I guess we're kind of getting up against it on our time limit here with Zoom. So, we got about 5 minutes left to go here before they cut us off. But I guess if you can leave people with one little bit of advice, like what's your advice moving forward? What do you see positive happening? What do you have to, I guess, what kind of piggybacking on what you just said, like what do you have to leave people with some positivity and encouragement?
Right. Yeah. So I mean, got to keep on keeping on. You know what I mean? Different industries are affected in different ways. If you're in hospitality, the truth of the matter is you might not be able to open your doors again. We're seeing it. It's reality. And so what's on the other side of that? I don't know, but you got to keep going. That's less economic advice and just more. You the business owner, you the employee of the small business, were a victim of circumstances beyond any of your control. And although it's small consolation when you're in the thick of it, that type of adversity often shapes what we're going to be doing next and how we approach life the next time. Mm-hmm. And so you got to keep on keeping on. Do your very best you can, do the small things that you can do. Take care of yourself personally, find a way to get some exercise in, eat right, use advantage, take the advantage of this shut-in to do some unique things that you might not be able to do externally, and just try and do your best to come out of it strongest that you can, And for a lot of people that are feeling vulnerable and don't know where to turn or what to do, reach out to the people that are close to you and talk to them, just do that kind of thing. That's the best you can do, and then I guess on the other side of that is we had talked about how life is going to be different. Because life's going to be different, the economy is going to be different. And because the economy is going to be different, that's going to require different types of services and goods. And so keep your ear to the ground, because there's going to be opportunity to innovate. I don't know exactly what that innovation is going to be, but it's going to be there. And everyone's experiences in whatever crevice and corner of the economy through which they previously participated is going to drive that innovation. And so looking at how life changes and then being one of the forerunners to change first, maybe provide some value somewhere there.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Couldn't agree more. Chad?
You know what, Keith nailed it. I'll add, what a great time to have a lot of networking and a lot of awareness, right? So if I'm going to be stuck at home, I'm going to use that time to make sure that I'm staying connected and having a high level of awareness to what's going on out there in regards to financing and business and things like that. Because sometimes it's those kind of connections that lead you to, hey, I know a guy who does this kind of financing, or hey, I know this kind of opportunity. And rather than just sitting at home, what a time to double down on those kind of connections. What a time to be listening to podcasts so that I stay on top of my industry. Stuff like that is really a good use of time.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Every crisis presents itself, presents a lot of opportunity as well. If you're kind of cognizant enough to take advantage of it. So real quick before we let you guys go, if somebody wants to reach out and talk further with you guys, how do we get in contact with Lighthouse Commercial Capital?
Call Derek.
Okay. 586-491-5622. I'll put you in touch with the right guys.
Yeah, we're at so it's when I established the company, I made a mistake and made the URL to our website, and our email address is way too long. But our web address is www.lighthousecommercialcapital.com.
But it sounds great. Yeah.
You can email us at info@lighthousecommercialcapital.com, and you can call Chad at
lighthousecommercialcapital.com or
what's your phone number?
269-615-1740.
Awesome. I really appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much for doing this, and have a great day, guys.
Thanks.
Take care.
Thanks for having us.